Yeah, he was a quiet guy, but he was also got an incredibly great sense of humor. He even kept a joke book. I would tell him jokes that I'd heard and yeah, whatever. And I finally, we were back at his house in Long Island. I finally told him a joke that he loved. He goes, "That's going in the book."
It's been a really tough month. We've lost a lot of rockers. This week we lost Rick Davies of Supertramp. When we released our tribute to Rick, their former guitarist Carl Verheyen reached out to us and said, thank you very much for doing that. I played with Supertramp for quite a long time. I was really familiar with his work. So we asked, let's do an interview. Let's talk about Rick and your career as well. Here's a guy who won tons of awards as a guitar player. We talk about that and a lot more. Carl Verheyen, Supertramp, on Rocky Street Music. For more than 50 years, Carl Verheyen has built one of the most diverse and respected careers in music. He's one of those critically acclaimed guitarists that you want to know. He's also a vocalist, songwriter, arranger, producer, and educator, and he's released 16 albums and 2 live DVDs. You watch these, man, you'll see how great this guy is. He can move between rock, jazz, blues, and pop. And in Los Angeles, he's known as a first call guitarist, which means you're the guy getting the call if they need someone in the studio. And he's been featuring on hundreds of albums, countless television shows, and some Hollywood blockbusters like Gladiator, Usual Suspects, Ratatouille, and True Lies. And in 2009, more than 60 million people heard him play during a feature solo at the Academy Awards. But of course, millions of people know Carl Verheyen from Supertramp. In 1985, while working as a session guitarist at Wildcat Studios in Los Angeles, a recording engineer passed his name to band management. They were auditioning guitarists, and Verheyen got his shot the very next day. He landed the gig and soon was on stage around the world as a sideman for Supertramp's first album without Roger Hodgson, Brother Where You Bound, and they toured in 85 and 86. When Rick Davies was putting the band back together quite a few years later, he called Verheyen to be a full-time member. With an expanded 8-man lineup, the band released Some Things Never Change. That was in 1997, an album that recaptured the classic Supertramp sound and charted in the UK. That era also produced a live record. It was The Best of Times. And in 2002, Verheyen went on to play on the Supertramp album Slow Motion. And he joined the group on its One More for the Road World Tour. In 2010 and 11, he returned again for the 70-10 tour, celebrating Supertramp's 40th anniversary with 35 shows across Europe. He also created the Carl Verheyen Band and collaborated with legends like B.B. King and Stuart Copeland. How did that gig happen? There was an audition, I take it.
Yeah, I was playing on at a recording. I was doing a lot of studio work in LA, and I playing on a recording session on the West Side. And I'd never met the woman that I was working for. She called me out of the blue, the singer. I had never met the engineer or been to that studio, but the engineer was a British guy, and he was really cool. And I got his number, and he got mine because I really liked what he did. So at that point, I got his number saying, man, I like the sounds you're getting from my rig and from my guitars and stuff. So he went home and I went home, and about 9:30 that night, I got a call from a guy I could barely understand, a British guy named Norman Hall, which is Norman Hall. And Norman turned out to be their front of house engineer. And he says, we're auditioning for guitarists. So would I be able to come down at like 9:30 or 10 a.m. the next morning, which was, a weekday morning? And I said, sure. I don't know much about Supertramp, but I'll come on down and check it out. So I got there, and all the Supertramp guys, well, it must have been John, Doogie, Bob, and Rick. They were in their tennis whites because Rick's house at the time was in LA, in Encino, not far from Michael Jackson, where the Jackson family grew up. But you walk in this, you come through a gate and you drive up, and then there's another gate, and there's a big backyard with a freestanding studio in the corner, and then tennis courts up here on an upper level. And they were up there playing tennis. So I went in, plugged in, set up, played a little. They all came in, and I said, guys, I got the call last night late. I didn't have any time to learn any of your songs. And Rick said, he goes, we don't want to play any of our bloody songs. Let's play the blues. So we played the blues, which I was way into and still am. And then they had me sing a tune, and they recorded everything on a reel-to-reel tape. And later that night, I got the call saying I'm hired. Now, I was a hired sideman through the rest of the 80s and up until I would say around 95. And then Rick started having these little jams at his house. And I'd kept in touch, but I think what they were doing is waiting for the A&M Records contract to get out to expire. I mean, I don't really know all the business stuff, but they after a year of these jam sessions at Rick's studio, where we would just play Ray Charles and Chuck Berry and occasionally throw in a new Rick song, we figured he's making a solo album, that it's over, Supertramp's over. So then one day I get a call from management saying, come on up to Rick's house. I came up and they said, okay, we're signed with EMI now, Supertramp. All those songs you've been rehearsing for a year are going to be the new album, and you're now a band member. So instead of a sideman with a weekly paycheck, I was now a much better, position. I just felt better about it, and financially, of course, it was better. And so,
Sure.
so that's how that all went down. And we made Some Things Never Changed and toured, and then made a live album of that. And that live album is live at the Albert Hall, and they recorded all 5 nights. And I remember Rick was perfect on night 4. I mean, he didn't have to fix any vocals, any keyboards. Usually these live albums, they go back in the studio and say, "Yeah, I'm flat on that note and everything." He had a
Not to
perfect,
mention Kiss Alive 1. Nothing.
oh, yeah,
Move on.
or not to mention "Waiting for Columbus" by Little Feat, where everything's redone. So anyway, um, I remember coming in and fixing a few background vocals that were not quite up to speed on that one. And and then we did the Slow Motion album, which came out right around nine. We were recording it during 9/11, which was really gnarly.
That's
Pardon
the
me?
mood.
Yeah, it was after one day of recording, that's what happened, So,
I was watching your interview with John's Guitar Lounge, and
oh yeah.
you said something in that interview, and that was a good interview. I really like that. You did the rehearsal, and obviously you're one of those type of guys. You did the work. You went in there, you knew all the songs at that point.
Yeah. There was a meeting at Rick's house after I had become a sideman, and this would be 1985. I think I was 29 years old. There was a meeting there where he said, "Okay, here are the parts. I want you to sing this. I want you to sing that. You've got this guitar part. You're playing the solo." So I was getting all the stuff, writing it down. And since I know how to read music, I was drawing little staffs really quickly and go, okay, I sing, you know, uh, then at night when all the sleep, I start on an E flat because the high guys got the G. I was putting all those lyrics and stuff in. I went home and learned it all. I mean, I just studied it. Then my wife and I took a little trip up to Big Sur, just a little, okay, before rehearsals start, we're going to do that. So then the rehearsals started at A&M Records, which was really fun because I had worked at A&M a lot in the studios, but I never knew they had this big kind of rehearsal hall. And I think they filmed a lot of Soul Train in there because one day we were rehearsing and we go out to have lunch and the whole parking lot is filled with all the Soul Train dancers, they were hot in their little outfits, right? So long story short, the 2 weeks there. Then we go to we went to Zoetrope Studios, which is a giant, sound stage. And I remember John Helliwell had a Ferrari and he would just drive it right in. You just drive right in and park by the stage, which is cool. And we rehearsed for another month. And these are called production rehearsals where they're getting the lighting right, right? You know about that stuff. So I'm like, this is really old school, because as a reading musician, I was used to coming into the studio, they put it in front of me, and by the second take, we've done an entire orchestra. We do a run through and then we play it down next cue, for movies and TVs and other people's records and stuff. So I was not used to the kind of garage band concept that they were coming from. And at one point there was a tune called Cannonball, really cool tune. And that record, they have this bit where they go at some point there's da taka taka, taka da da, da taka taka. There's a drum thing, right? And it's a percussion thing. And they go, "Who's not doing anything in this section?" And I wasn't. I was chilling. It was just a little 16 bar period where I had no guitar parts to play. So they go, "Would you be able to play that?" And I go, "Sure." So they put up a little electronic drum right by me and my pedal board and my microphone and everything. They put it over here, gave me a couple drum sticks, and it came time to do it, and it was finger snaps, and they stopped the whole rehearsal to send a guy down to Guitar Center and pick up the right chip so it's hand claps. And I'm going, guys, I'm just Mr. Efficient, because of
Yeah.
studio time is thousands of bucks a minute when you're doing bigger orchestra type dates. So, long story short, we just stopped everything. I said, well, should we work on some vocals? No, we got to get this right. It was so old school. Um, uh, I kind of killed it for us in the '85 US tour. They had hired my buddy Mark Hart, who's got a voice like Roger. He had a higher voice. So
Yeah.
they hired Mark and I to be in the band, me to play the guitar parts, him to play keyboards and sing the Roger stuff. Like Roger really needed to be replaced by two guys because he's such a monster talent, right? So um, at one point, we were playing in Chicago, and Mark's child got really sick to a point where he really needed to go home and be with his wife because their brand new baby was about to die. So Rick called me up and said, "Hey, can you come to my room?" So I came to his room and he said, "Carl, you know a lot of the LA musicians. Would you know anybody who'd be able to kind of learn this stuff in a hurry?" And I said, "Look, I got a guy. You send him the music. I mean, the a cassette tape of the live show. He will transcribe it. He can hear it. He will write it out on the way to the airport in the limo. And by the time he gets here, we could rehearse with him. And I bet you we'll only miss one show." So it was my friend Brad Cole who then went on to be Phil Collins's musical director. So that was a really interesting thing because Mark had to leave for 5, 6 days, and Brad came out, filled in, and nailed it. I mean, just incredibly. I don't know who they got to sing those higher parts, but because it sure wasn't me at the time. But the show went on, and I think Milwaukee and Minneapolis and Madison, there was just a bunch of shows right around Chicago that we hubbed out to.
Was
And
Mark's baby okay?
no, that baby died. So,
Really?
yeah, within about a week or so. Then Mark came back on the tour and they just kept Brad out for a little while, just kept him out and paid him really well. So, anyway, it was so what I was getting at is I kind of killed these months of rehearsals because they realized, wow, these guys can pick this stuff up much faster than we thought. And they'd just give you, eventually Rick would just send me a set list. This is what we're doing. And I'd write out or learn all my parts. And then, as the tours went on through the years, he would add different obscure tunes that weren't really the hits, but you know, "Oh Darling," and different things off the records that the fans would know. So that was kind of cool. I'd have to like figure those out.
I always tell fans of any band, no one's wrong with what they like. I might
Right.
hate what they like, but
Yeah.
it's an apples and oranges thing. If someone would have told me when a girlfriend broke up with me in elementary school, apples and orange got nothing to do with you. You don't even know each other. Come on, get over it. Don't take it personally. But you got to process it, right? It's a process. But
Right.
like I said in the tribute, I was a Roger fan all along, and then one day I started realizing I'm humming more of Rick's songs. Like From Now On to me is one of my all-time favorite.
Yeah.
That coming up with that piano, I remember going, that has stuck in my mind since 1977.
Yeah. It was a beautiful song to play live too, because everybody would sing along, and no, I agree. Roger had more of the hits, but Rick had the real soulful stuff. And I was really surprised to find out that he was a major jazz fan, a huge Ray Charles fan, and he was such a good guitar player too. Is such a good guitar player. He played right down the street from me when there was a little club, and I didn't know about it till after it was done. He was just sitting in with a band of guys that I know, and apparently they played "She's Come Undone" and some really great Guess Who stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, who were the guys for you when you how old were you? 10? How old were you when you picked up the
I got
guitar?
a first guitar at age 11, actually on my 11th birthday after begging for one for about a year. And I got a lesson later that day. So I get my guitar in the morning. Okay, you got a guitar lesson at 3. So that's the way that went down. And I really never looked back. But my first influences were, of course, George Harrison, but also Roger McGuinn, a huge fan of the Byrds. And then, as you grow a little bit more into stuff and you realize that you guys got like Clapton, who's kind of taken it to the virtuoso level of rock guitar. And then he starts talking about, Albert King and Buddy Guy. And so you check those guys out. And then Led Zeppelin comes. I got to see Led Zeppelin on their first tour just because there was a place where I'm from in Pasadena. There's a place called the Rose Palace. And I think they did the Rose Bowl floats in there. It's bizarre. And so
What
they
was
would
your
have,
impression? What was your impression of seeing them live?
well, I was probably over my head. I had to be 17 maybe. But yeah, it was heavy. It was good, but anything rock and roll was I was buying it, in those days. So, but
And were you into the blues? Because that album's very bluesy, that especially the first one. But were you like head first in the blues?
yeah, yeah, I was a big Mike Bloomfield fan, and so Super Session, and of course the East West album by Butterfield Blues Band. I was really into that, and then I realized somebody told me "Strange Brew" by Cream. I
Yeah.
think it's on the not Fresh Cream album. It's on the Disraeli Gears album. Okay, so "Strange Brew" is almost note for note "Oh Pretty Woman" by Albert King. Somebody told me that Clapton just pretty much copied it. So check those two out side by side. Um, Albert does kind of the same solo in every tune. That's his thing, right? He does that. Crosscut Saw, all those Albert King tunes are that one solo, and it's just so killer. It's just does the pentatonic 5 note scale and just milks it for everything it's got, with his bends. Because he was upside down pulling strings down instead of pushing up. And anyway, so you listen to Clapton's Strange Brew, girl, what's inside of it? Same solo.
Yeah.
And people called him on it, and he goes, "Yeah, that's true." So anyway, so I think right about that time I got into Albert King and got to see him play a few times. And so it's like my buddy Cliff always said, when the British get it, they really get it. You know what I mean? So like for Cream to take, what is it, a Howlin' Wolf tune Spoonful and turn it into this 16-minute jam. And for Led Zeppelin to take some of that Chess Records stuff, Willie Dixon, and turn it into what they did.
Yeah.
And every one of the ones that have the Rolling Stones are the best example because they just ripped off all this American blues and ran with it, and it's great. I mean, I got no problem. The way they filter it back. And when I used to talk to Rick about some of the bands he liked, the American blues and jazz guys, he was a big fan of Jethro Tull, you know.
Really?
Yeah. And I go, really? And I gotten to know Martin Barr. We have the same agent. And so Martin and I have done a few concerts together, and I sit in whenever he comes to LA.
Oh
I
my
sit,
God.
play Locomotive Breath stuff. So, but yeah, we talk about it, and those guys were all into what we were doing as we were into what they were doing.
Guitar player that you knew that told you to write your riffs down in one of the interviews you said of going, if you hear something that's yours and you start playing it, write it down. I like that.
Right. Yeah, that was a guy named Joe DiOrio. And as I've been thinking about Rick Davies lately, I think about like, you know, everybody's life at our age basically has 4 or 5 people that when you met them, they changed you, you know. And for me, I'm choking up. Rick is one of those guys, it's heavy. And Joe DiOrio was another one where I went for some lessons because I really liked where what he was doing. And just he had this sense of melody that was different from everybody else's. In that, if you know what chromatic means, meaning if I play an F, the next chromatic note is F sharp, and the next one's G, and then G sharp and A. So chromatic means playing either every note in the 12 tone scale all the way up, or just playing scalar, just using the notes in the scale. And that would give you half steps and whole steps, right? So Joe didn't do that. Said, if you hear something that sounds like you or something that sounds different, write it down and finger it, meaning you can write the notes out, but if you don't know how you did it, it won't sound the same. Because this could be a slide here and then you instead of the second string, you did it on the third string, a lot of little subtleties. So I started keeping what we call a lick book. And Joe, when I was taking lessons, he opened this closet and he had a stack of them like this high. He goes, man, I've been doing this forever. So I started doing it. I probably have a stack about this high because I started it in about 1978. And, the thing is, when you have a musical diary, you have kind of a reference point to look back. What was I doing 2 years ago or 6 years ago? Wow, there's a great line for G major that never got under my hands. So as a player, I can start to experiment with that. And one time, you know who Robin Ford is, right?
Mhm.
So Robin and I were jamming one day at his house. And I said, Robin, man, you've got just an infinite well of great musical ideas. How do you catalog them? And he goes, well, if I get a good idea, I just push my cassette player record right here. It was mounted in the wall there, so in a cabinet. And I go, yeah, then what? And he goes, well, when the cassette fills up, I flip it over and record the side two. And I go, well, duh, then what? And he goes, well, I put it in that box over there. And across the room, there's this like TV set box just brimming, back in tube TVs, brimming with cassettes. And I said, so do you ever listen to that stuff? And he goes, nah. So
Oh my
that's
God.
he never did. He never listens to it. Now, maybe for songwriting, he might pull one out and go, what was I thinking? But for me, the book is always there on my music stand or on my counter in my studio downstairs. And I can just go, like I'm getting ready to record and I go, boy, there'd be a nice counter line in this song. Before it goes from the A major to the C, I could do something that brings you there with and maybe I'll use the Gibson SG or the Les Paul for that with a little hair on it. So I'm making notes and everything else. So,
A situation where after 2015 there could have been was there any other talk about getting back on the road?
there really wasn't talk about it when we heard that the tour is canceled. That was a real shock because it was probably about maybe late August, and we were going to go out like the end of September and be out for like 2 or 3 months. And it was going to be called the Supertramp Forever Tour. And it was probably like a greatest hits thing, that kind of deal. And boy, I mean, we were so excited, and everybody's getting to talking, and I got my guitar tech hired and tweaking the rig and everything. Then we found out it's not going to happen. And I kept in touch with Rick, and occasionally, like he hated Las Vegas. He always thought that was the place where burnt out musicians go to die, right? But then people like Elton John were there, and Sting was there, and a lot of people. We saw Bryan Adams there. Um, I just went and saw the Dead and Company at the Sphere, and it was amazing, just incredible. The Sphere is really something to see
Yeah.
because it's a 20,000 seater where the screen is everywhere,
Well,
so.
the Eagles just announced more. Just today, they announced
Oh,
shows,
did they?
more
Yeah.
shows for 2026. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I hope the Dead and Company do too, because they have the most amazing imagery. I hear the Eagles show is great, but it's a little sedate, where the Dead had done it the year before and realized just how far you could push it. And I believe John Mayer owns 51% of that company. And so he's the guy that put all that video together. He's the guy that commissioned all the video and then ran it by Bob Weir and Kreutzmann and then Billy Hart is his name, you know. And it was an amazing show. But boy, I can see that they really can't push it any farther or you're going to get sick. I talked to Rick. I said, I know you're not a big Vegas fan, but we could do a residency to where you finish the gig and you go upstairs and crash, and then next day lay by the pool until we play again. So anyway, but he just didn't seem like he ever had the energy, So I think at 2015 when he got diagnosed, he called it. He must have mentally just said, that's it. Although, God, I know there was a lot of encouragement probably from the European promoters and the Canadian promoters and stuff. Um, and yeah, it's a shame, really a shame.
Not notice that as much with the post Roger leaving. Brother, Where You Bound came out. I remember going, I freaking love, and I love the way that Bob comes in on Cannonball and kind of the offbeat there in the beginning.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really great as a drummer. Even then, I wasn't in the Rick camp 100% yet, but I was a Roger guy. And I met Roger when he released his first album at a thing in Edmonton. But I loved that album. I thought that album was freaking
It's a
amazing.
cool record. Yeah, it's really
It's
nice.
to me, it was Supertramp. I thought I miss Roger, but that's Supertramp.
Yeah, it definitely took a different vibe. And then we did those tours, 85 and 86, and didn't play any Rogers songs, which was really interesting because we wondered how the fans would dig it or not. I remember the very first gig I did with them, we finished this, and it was in Newfoundland. And we we finished, we played at this hockey stadium, right? And we did 3 nights in a row there, or maybe even 4 or 5. It was a long time there. It was real. I got to know St. John's really well. And I remember after the very first show, and it's huge hockey arena, right? Maybe 15,000, maybe more. So there were metal bleachers. And I remember going downstairs to the dressing room and the thundering feet, right, of the people up there wanting an encore is going on, right? And I was used to playing for much smaller audiences, not 20,000 people. So I'm kind of going, guys, I think they want us back, right? The tradition of Supertramp was to decant a port wine through cheesecloth. And so like for the next 10 or 15 minutes, it seemed like an eternity. The lights are down, so nobody's going to leave right up there. And they're just doing this, and it's thundering, and we're just toasting and everything. But I mean, this port was just dribbling through, the cheesecloth into the decanter, and then we all get a sip. And then, okay, let's go do it. And we went up and played Crime or something. Yeah, the Crime of the Century was always the last tune. But I was so shocked because I had a little band going, and we'd go off the stage and walk like 20 feet to the dressing room and go, not even go through the door, right? Just go, thank you very much, everybody. So good. We got one more song for you, and we'd play it. These guys are like, they're not going anywhere, and I had no idea that was the drill.
Thanks for watching the video. Carl's a really good guy. He's got a new album out. He's working on it actually right now. And we're going to have him back to talk about more Supertramp stories and tales of other artists he's worked with. Remember, if you want to help out the channel, we have a PayPal link for donations. We need them these days because of how uncertain YouTube revenue has been lately for a lot of creators. Subscribe to our channel, click that bell notification so you don't miss anything. Comment on our videos, like them, and share them on social media. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Music. Take care of yourself.